Cadets from a military academy overrun by ISIS militants in June, herded to slaughter. ISIS filmed their murder, perhaps their most infamous shock video yet, used to speed their advance with horror. Here they chant ISIS forever, anything to buy time alive. In the dusk, the masked men take leisurely turns in the anonymous, endless killing of perhaps 1,700 people.
All right, folks, of course, just a little reminder of what ISIS is, and of course, with all that's going on in Missouri, just as the case with every scandal and every item of importance, it kind of gets pushed to the back. We're not going to let that happen here. So we're joined right now by Jack Kelly, columnist for the Pittsburgh Post Gazette, and James Kirchick, columnist for Haaretz of Israel. And gentlemen, welcome. I want to start with you, Jack, if I may, and your piece, Threats Proliferate Under Obama, regarding ISIS. What gets me is Obama, just like he has in scandal after scandal, basically came out and said, I found out about this on CNN. When, as it turns out, there were not only hearings for years about the threat of ISIS, congressional hearings, but fairly recently, while they were in Syria doing what they were doing, hearings and concerns voiced about the threat of ISIS growing in scope and heading into Iraq. Where the heck was the president in all this?
On the links, Steve. Is that no president has been less engaged. Of course, he doesn't, the truth is not much in him. His intelligence community is up in arms about his attempt to throw them under the bus, to blame his remark in January that ISIS was just a JV team on poor intelligence. The fact is the intelligence community has been warning about the growth of Islamic fundamentalism in general and about ISIS's threat in particular for years, and doing everything but scream. And the White House just shut themselves down. They just didn't pay attention.
And James, your column that I'm looking at here in National Review, Pity America's Friends, and absolutely, and we'll get to what you mean by that. But again, it's not like ISIS popped out overnight and took everybody by surprise. And the most recent, of course, alert was before they started their rampage through Iraq. The Iraqi government said, okay, this group is forming, they're massing, let's have airstrikes, and we ignored them.
The president ran in 2008 on being an anti-war president, on extracting America from the Middle East, and he did that in 2011 without securing any sort of status of forces agreement that would have allowed the United States to maintain a troop presence in Iraq, just like we still have soldiers in Germany and Japan 70 years after World War II, or 27,000 soldiers in South Korea many years after the Korean War. And no one would accuse us of occupying those countries. Yet the way that the president and his supporters characterized our troop presence in Iraq in 2010, 2011 was as an occupation, which was just completely inaccurate. And then the president ran for re-election in 2012 boasting that he had done this. And so, becoming engaged again in Iraq would totally go against everything that he ran on in his entire worldview, which is, I think, one of the reasons why he's been so reluctant to get involved again.
And Jack, the repercussions of this for America primarily, because that's where we are, but for the rest of the world, especially, of course, the Christians and the minority populations in Iraq and Syria and Jordan, and who knows where they'll stop.
Well, if they're not stopped, they'll keep going. They can be stopped. They are showing a fair degree of military sophistication, and they're flush with military equipment. A lot of it captured from the Syrian and the Iraqi armies. And one reason why the Kurds have been in difficult circumstances is because they've got all these armored vehicles that we gave to the Iraqi army, which just ran away. And then apparently the CIA also supplied them with some modern weapons when they were not careful about who they were arming among the Syrian rebels 2 years ago.
Right, right. And this talks to your point, James, the point of your column. What does it mean for our friends in this particular instance as far as ISIS and if they're allowed to continue to rampage?
I think one of the problems here is that the Obama administration has held up in trying to achieve better relations with Iran as basically the holy grail of its Middle Eastern strategy. And this goes all the way back to the very beginning of the first administration when you saw the Green Revolution arise in response to the rigged election in 2009. And you saw the Obama administration basically hang those people out to dry. You've seen that progressively with the Iranian nuclear negotiations. And all you need to do is talk to our allies in the region, not just the Israelis, but talk to the Saudis, talk to the Jordanians, talk to the Egyptian government and how they feel about a rising Iran and rising Iranian hegemony, which they see the United States as basically facilitating in hopes that we can reach some sort of accommodation with the Iranian regime. So it's not just Israel and its supporters in the United States who are disappointed with this administration. It's a lot of our traditional allies in the Arab world as well.
Jack, I mean, James is so correct, as I'm sure you well agree. What is it with this president? If he had his way, Mohamed Morsi would still be the president of Egypt. We know how ticked off the whole administration and State Department was when they were thrown out of power and outlawed as a group. We've seen what this president has wrought in Libya. We've seen what he's wrought or allowed to happen in Syria, as mentioned by James so eloquently. His reaching out to, even before he announced it, to Iran, and looking at Iran as, I don't know what, the great hope for world peace. What is it with his affinity towards the Muslim Brotherhood and an Islamic regime, or as he calls them, the Honorable Islamic Republic of Iran? I don't get it. Is this purposeful?
Well, we can't really know, Steve. I have my suspicions about why he has displayed such a soft spot for the Muslim Brotherhood. But I don't think it behooves critics of the administration policy to go there too much. The American people, if they think that the policies of this administration and of the Democrats which support it are ruining the country, don't need to be convinced that they're doing it deliberately in order to vote against them.
No, that's very true. What about it, James? I mean, what's your sentiment on? I mean, is this all by accident? Don't get me wrong. The president is a Christian. He says he's a Christian. He's a Christian. He's not a Muslim. But there is a sympathy, I believe, for Muslims, the Palestinians, recognizing almost Hamas, continuing to fund a government that includes Hamas, almost equating Hamas in negotiations with Israel. So, I mean, again, and everything else I stated about Egypt and Libya and Syria, what is this all by accident or not?
I just think it's generally a worldview that sees political Islam or Islamism as a force that we can basically have peace with and that we can negotiate with, and that underestimates the dangers and the threats that it poses. And so that's really what I think it is. And I don't consider this pro or anti-Muslim. I mean, I think it's actually, there are lots of Muslims who would disagree with the Muslim Brotherhood and don't like them.
No, I'm not. Of course, I'm not. Yeah, I'm talking about the Muslim Brotherhood and the Hamases of the world and the rebels, quote unquote, that we supported, as noted by you or Jack, in Syria and in Libya. You know, I'm not talking about your average Muslim. You know.
Right. Yeah, I just think it's it's a worldview that I happen to disagree with. I don't, and I think it's borne pretty bad fruits over the past couple of years. I'm surprised that they're still sticking with it.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for participating. Great pieces, both of you. Jack Kelly, Pittsburgh Post Gazette, and James Kirchick, Haaretz newspaper. Thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's look. When I say that, and I ask that question often, and I get different answers from people. And people, you know, it's hard to believe that the president is that stupid or naive. It's hard to believe the president doesn't know the history of Iran. It's hard to believe he doesn't know that they have been supplying the weapons, the roadside explosives that kill our troops in Afghanistan, as he reaches out to them and wants to shake their hand at the UN and sit down and have coffee with them. It's hard to believe he could view the nuclear talks in a bubble without knowing what their religious philosophy is. They're not the Soviet Union. Mutually assured destruction will not prevent Iran the way it did the Soviets from hitting us or trying to. Because their imams, the people who run their country, their ayatollahs, believe that Armageddon will bring back their, missing or their imam, and that'll be it. They all go to heaven. So, whatever. Give Me 5 is next, folks, on the Steve Malzberg Show.